South Africans love their sport and their sporting heroes. But behind the applause, the medals and the championships, many athletes face a harder reality. Careers can be cut short by injury, age, limited opportunity, and often by poor financial decisions made without the right support. For many athletes, there's a distinct gap in financial literacy and a lack of knowledge and skills to secure long-term financial well-being. Investec believes that education is one of the most powerful tools for creating enduring worth. As a trusted financial partner for athletes and their supporters, is committed to equipping athletes and you at home with the information, guidance, and skills we all need throughout our wealth creation journeys. Welcome to Everything Counts Sports Edition, a special 4-part vodcast series featuring 4 of Investec's brand ambassadors and some of the most loved athletes in the country. Once a month, we sit down with one of our ambassadors and get frank about money. Hello, I'm Mpumelelo Mhlongo, the host of Everything Counts Sports Edition. Today's guest is a sprint and long jump athlete, a Paralympic Games record holder, and a man known for his grit and determination on and off the track. Mpumelelo Mhlongo's journey is one of resilience, discipline, and purpose. Mpumi, it's so good to have you here on Everything Counts Sports Edition. Thank you for joining us. Growing up, you weren't always clued up about money. Who were those people that introduced you to the concept of money and how to treat it? Before you knew anything about money, you were the fastest kid in your neighborhood. Just tell us about your time in Chatsworth growing up in Klaarwater.
You grow up in the mid-90s in this little township, Klaarwater or Klaarwater, I'm Zulu, so we don't brought the tall so well there in KZN. And the reason why I ended up being known as the fastest kid is because you need a differentiator. Kids can be ruthless in terms of how mean they are in their honesty, especially when they don't understand something. So how do you explain in isiZulu amniotic band syndrome with a deformed clubfoot?
It's quite rare.
It's quite rare. It's a rare condition in itself, and it doesn't have any translation. And I think what I then lean towards is that the fastest kid is not picked on. The fastest kid is somebody you want in your community, you want on the sports field with you, because those are the people that will do football, will do cricket, will do whatever sport it is, because you've got that natural acumen to pick up those disciplines.
Who helped you then deal with that misunderstanding of the condition and just the stigma that came around being the different kid, I would imagine?
I think my mother removed it from me. Honestly, the protection mechanism wasn't really let me sit you down and let you understand what this disability is. And even back then, we didn't call it a disability. It was really a deformity. The word of being disabled is something I learned much later in life. So I just thought I had a deformed foot. I have deformed hands. But I didn't think that meant that I was actually disabled in any means, because the idea that I'm not able doesn't make sense to me if I'm the fastest kid in my neighborhood. So if I'm not able, who the hell is able, Her protection mechanism was to say the club foot is her foot. If somebody comes to you and teases you, they're really showing you the insecurities they have. When a kid tries to bully you, it's because they don't understand themselves. They're interacting with the world that is mean. And the best way to do that is to put attention to somebody else. And I'm not an attention seeker, but if you want to give me the attention, I'll take it and run.
Take us into the home then. Who's in the house? Who's teaching you to do what? Are you doing chores for the money?
We had a big household. My grand, bless her soul, with 340 Rand a month, had 17 people in one household, this 2-bedroom room. So really what it was is that she would say that if you clean up after all your cousins and your uncles, I will then reward you with 2 Rand at the end of the month as a service charge for what you're doing around the home. So that's what I would get paid for, is that if you want somebody to go to the shops for you, I'm your guy. It's just I'm going to take a bit of commission and buy myself some chappies. At that point, I didn't know what accumulating wealth was, but I did know what big spending was.
So you weren't only just fast in the playground, you were fast with spending the money as well.
Almost faster spending the money than running.
Looking back at your life now, I mean, the sacrifices that were made with your conditions, both financially and emotionally by your family, what can you recount in terms of, the doctor's visits and what it took to actually make sure to take care of you?
That's a hard question because it's really a question my parents should answer. But the conversations that I've had with them is my mom is very particular with languaging. And because I grew up with isiZulu, which is not a very direct language, is a language that speaks in metaphors and, it's so poetic with idioms and similes. So she would say, I don't like the word sacrifice. I didn't sacrifice anything. All I did is provide an opportunity for my child to get the best future possible that I could afford them with what I knew and with the resources that I had access to. And I think what really took a strain was less actually the financial needs, because we still use a lot of public health care across the board. What we don't talk about, which I think of as a sacrifice, was the sacrifice of time. And that value of time, that is something that you can never quantify, because she was traveling 2.5 hours while having a full-time job, while still going through and getting a teacher's diploma. So time was what I think she sacrificed throughout those years. And then my dad would have sacrificed his energy. And it was the energy of ensuring that he was there to lift her up. He was there to make me feel comfortable, knowing that people are going to poke, they're going to prod, and I'm never going to understand why.
Who pushed you then on the academic side? Because you're not only good on the track and field, you also have the book smarts as well. Who was also like, you need to do the schoolwork even though you're the star on the field?
Honestly, that's just chance. But what happened is that when I was at Kersney in grade 9, they took away my athletic scholarship. And it was one of those, it's either I need to assimilate and become an academic so that I can get the scholarship that I need to matriculate as a Kersney College old boy, or I would need to find another school. And I had my English teacher, Mrs. White, another one, Mr. Bissell at the time, who said, you are coachable. You've demonstrated it on the sports field. And all you have to do is be coachable in the classroom. And through that, I managed to work my way up. I was in the top 5 in the grade. And with that, I got an academic scholarship to Kersney. And then ever since, people have called me academic. So I went from being stupid to being one of the smartest people in KZN.
What was the financial implication of that, the scholarship that came at the time? Because a lot of families will tell you education is very expensive and it can weigh heavily on the family budget. Did you feel the responsibility that came with that?
My parents were very clear from the get-go. They said, you either go to a school that we don't have to pay and we've got a max budget that we're going to pay. What I did see is that there was a lot of alleviation from the family, because as soon as you're a scholarship kid in high school, opens other opportunities. I go to UCT, I'm a bursar, and the bursary was paying me on a monthly basis more money than my entire family has ever made from a monthly salary perspective. So then also really switches your mindset of responsibility. Now I am the highest earner that has ever existed in my family. What do I do with that? And how many more people, my siblings, the cousins, the people from that community could also do the same, so that we are all alleviated from this, educational poverty that we think that is a way of life, but it's really about the journeys that we have access to. And if we can choose to get into those rooms, there's a 1% chance you will be the lucky one.
So tell us about what you did with that, because that is almost the first contract that you get on the academic side. There's a bit of money coming in.
So I knew res was paid for. I knew my food was paid for, and I could walk up and down. I'm at the University of Cape Town. I don't need anything else from a spending perspective. So that money actually went towards paying my parents' home's mortgage. So I said, I will pay the mortgage directly with this full bursary. And with that, it alleviates cash flow for the family. With that alleviation of cash flow, can we invest in better education for the rest of the extended family? And then we created a fund that went through both grandmothers. I come from a home of matriarchs, so the grandmothers hold the purse, because if they do, nothing is going to be spent in places where it shouldn't be. And with that, we managed to take 32 of our extended family through really good school, and they've gone on to be doctors, to be engineers, to be lawyers, careers and really forge a life for themselves that otherwise I would not have been able to do anything for without me knowing how to really spend that bursary on a monthly basis.
What were those early money lessons that led you to think like that at such a young age?
I think the core of it is like if you treat money the same way you treat your energy, then you know that you have to invest and you have to be very intentional. And after being intentional, you need to go seek out the skill sets, right? I look at the youth of today and I look at people who cry about, hand to mouth and I'm always broke. And there is a reality there that some people will never earn enough to be able to live the lifestyle that they want or they deserve. But there is another side to that coin to say that, do you actually have the skills? Yes, you have the want. Yes, you have the intention of building wealth. But what does it mean? Do you know that the first point of building wealth is to have an emergency fund? So when my salary comes in, it goes immediately to emergency fund.
Yeah.
What does that emergency fund look like? Should it support me 3 months? Should it support me 6 months? It really depends on the career trajectory and the financial stability you have in your profession. Thereafter, you've got a tax savings haven in South Africa that you should be investing fully in throughout the year. How much of your immediate cash flow are you putting into that? So as I was developing those skills by asking the right questions and seeking out the knowledge, we've got a real problem where people don't start and then blame the fact that they have a circumstance that won't allow them to build up wealth. But you can only build up wealth by starting today. And if you start with 1 Rand, 50 cents, 10 Rand, 30 Rand, whatever it might be, as long as you're starting, then you'll have the accumulation of discipline to ensure that that builds up over time.
I like what you said about young people having to ask the right questions. What exactly are those, especially when it comes to money?
I'm not going to assume I know the right questions for every young person out there. But I think that it's more about the lead up questions. Before you sign your contract, you need to ask yourself, do I want a monetary value associated with that contract so that I get out cash? Or would I like to attach that to an access to a resource where I will reutilize the very same cash that I'm getting for that resource so that I can be a better athlete, a better sports star, or I can then get an education on the side? So when I say the right questions is you have to really have clarity of who you are. You have to have clarity of the sort of trajectory that you want in your career. And when you have that clarity, you're able to negotiate a better form for the individual that is sitting in front of whoever that sponsor might be. So maybe what you want to weave in is to ask the sponsor, because most of the time it's a corporate, it's a known brand. They've been there, they've got accountants, they have access to the very same people that could assist you embed that into your contract. So you can ask them that, can we carve out a portion of this contract that goes into an investment vehicle? Think more than I just want money in my pocket. It's what does that money do? Where does that money go? And then you'll find the right questions for yourself if you think from that frame of mind.
When did the first serious athletics contract come, and what exactly did you do with that first paycheck?
That paycheck is still invested to this day. It was really 2015. I went and represented the country at the Doha World Championships. Toyota had really good performance bonuses that they put into the athlete, and we did a stellar job just before the Rio Paralympic Games. And I told myself that this is going to be an investment into my children's future should have the privilege of ever having children one day. And I put that aside, and that has sat in a unit trust for now, 11 years.
Is that the realization of an athlete who knows just how short a career in sport can be? Or is it just the discipline that you were brought up with that said, I'd put this money away?
It was less the athlete and the person who said, here, I've been selfish for a period of years. That selfishness has led to me taking a time away from the people I love. I know that one day I will want to have a family. I'll want to build something for that family. If this is not the best time to start, then when is? Because I'm young, I'm traveling the world on somebody else's budget. I get to represent the country. And if I can tuck away a bit of wealth for another generation, if I don't have children, that will go into a fund that maybe supports supports education, supports people living with disabilities, whatever it might be.
Would you say there's more pressure at the starting line before the gun goes off, or just the pressure of building a future for your family and being financially secure?
I think there's definitely more pressure on being financially secure. If I lose a race, I lost a race, you know.
Yeah, I'll try again.
I'll try again next race. And we got to a point where I didn't feel that pressure on the start line, not because I thought I was better than anyone, it was because I thought I'd done more work. I've put in the hours. I can't look around my competitors and feel as though they've done more than me or they've tried something that I haven't. And that is really a testament, not to me, but my team. It's my coach who is, we call him the captain of the ship, because he has to put together the plan. He has to do the periodization. He has to get the bio to look at the strength and conditioning, who looks at the physio. My job is easy. I go there and I smile and I complain. Like, that's the easiest job in the world, and I play in sand.
The discipline you have with money tells me you're quite strict with it. But what are some of those things that, have you weak with your money? Like you spend on gadgets, or maybe things that you're interested in?
No, listen, honestly, I'm weak if my mom asks for anything, or my wife.
Then it just comes out.
So all of a sudden, then I don't have limits. But so it's more about the people I'm spending on. My wife is a lover of books, so I'll spend a fortune on every novel out there. She's a lover of experience. I didn't realize I'd rather her love handbags than experience, because flights are more expensive than handbags.
And accommodation.
And accommodation. And then my mom loves her countryside, so we built a farm. We ensured that she could see that landmass for herself. So when it comes to those very sentimental things for the people that I hold dear, I don't think there's a limit to how much I'll spend. But to myself, no, not really. I'm a simpleton. I love freebies. They always call me cheap. And I'm cheap because what fuels me is about running. If I'm running barefoot or with the latest shoes, doesn't really matter as long as I get to run while I can.
You talk about your wife. Was there a moment, when you knew, okay, I'm about to marry this beautiful lady, I need to make sure I have the funds to do it firstly, and that I can secure our future?
I'm going to expose myself here, because I met her in orientation week, which is the first week of university. The day I met her is the day I was sure. So I remember like being extremely sure that this is the person I want to spend my life with. She's stubborn. She knows too much. So she's a know-it-all. She's gorgeous, but in that self-confidence, there's so much humanity that just spews out of her. And then immediately I started saving. So I started saving for the ring that I was going to buy her from the day that I met her. And that saving continued. We saved for our first house together through all the sports contracts and bonuses. We saved for our first investment house together. I think that for me happened so early that I almost blinked and it was already there.
I think the good thing is that you gave yourself a bit of time.
Yeah, I gave myself 10 years before I needed to do anything. So we only got married 10 years later from the day we met.
You're not only a track and field athlete, you also have a full-on career in finance. And some would probably say, watching this, that, that's why he's so good with money.
Yeah, I think everything in life is demanding, right? It's so demanding, and my mom always laughs, this demanding and so risky that none of us come out alive. And in that being demanding, it's really what you choose to do with your day, how you choose to influence who you want to be later. I'm an engineer by academic background that turned financier, and I really only went into finance because of our current head of private bank at Investec, Mpumelelo Mhlongo. When I met him, I was like, these are the people I want to work for. So it was more about the person and less about the industry, because I feel as though when you surround yourself with really incredible people that moonshots in terms of their character, in terms of what they want to do in the world, you yourself will become an embodiment of a little snippet of the magic that they have. And that's how I ended up in finance. So in balancing the two, they're very complementary. One requires you to wake up knowing what you're going to do every day. The other is risk management strategies for our corporate division. I live in global markets, so it's fast moving. People are always shouting, where you buying, where you selling. And then really the quietness that you create is in asking, what does this mean if a corporate in South Africa has financial stability and knows how to manage their risks? They will be able to live out their true mission, which has nothing to do with the global markets. And that's fulfilling.
What are some of the key lessons that you've learned being at Investec? Because that's total finance, that's where the money is. But what are some of those things that you learned being part of the team at Investec?
I think the big lessons that I've learned to being part of the team is that I know it sounds corny, but culture is everything. Because if you break it down in terms of the psychology of trying to achieve anything in this world, it's about, and sports has taught us who surrounds you. The brand itself as Investec doesn't go out and achieve anything in the world if it doesn't have the people who believe in that mission that is shared and believes in the pathways and the iterations while you service the human being that works in the organization. And I think like the take home of what I've learned, if I had to summate it in anything, is that I work with people who don't go to work to do a job. I work with people who are in service of ensuring that there is a value proposition that we give to clients, which is focus on what you do best and let us worry about everything else.
For someone who's gone through it, being a student athlete all these years, how important is the knowledge of financial literacy, learning how to handle your money as an athlete?
I think it's everything. You hear of athletes, and it's very sad when I even think about it now, where they span an entire career and they get to that end of that career and all they have to show for it is accolades, but they haven't built up any financial buffer for themselves. They haven't built up any wealth. They haven't built up any interest that exists outside of what they did as an athlete, as a sports person. So I think we should be teaching kids as young as possible to say that money itself is not important. It's what money gives you access to. And when you need access to resources in a world where we have a capitalist society and we kind of run away from it, if you want something, you need to spend something. You yourself need to understand that when you are done with the mission at hand, which is to represent your country, represent your brand or your football club, you want to have enough wealth to say, well, what else can I do with my life? And you can only do that if you have a buffer of wealth that will translate in you being able to catapult into corporate, into business, into philanthropy or whatever it might be, where you're not coming empty-handed, but you're coming with, here's a legacy that I've built up over the years, and this is the disciplines that I can translate into helping others do the same.
Do athletes talk about money with each other as they
all the time
train? I'm sure you make sure of it.
Athletes complain all the time.
And what are some of the topics that you guys cover when it comes to finance?
The big one is always first, like, I think athletes come from, what are my expenses? So how can I get brands that are aligned with me so that I have a sponsorship that pays for those expenses? Because it's a big team. Athletics, which is seen as like a singular person sport, I've got a team of 7 people that are completely dedicated to a vision that is not even mine. And so athletes will come and say, this is my expense, after my expense, this is what I need to get in so that I can just manage life. But I think where the conversation really needs to go to is that we have a savior complex within all sports. So the big sporting codes get all the attention, get all the media, and therefore they get all the financial money. But that doesn't mean that in a world of this digital access to anywhere, we can't, as smaller sporting codes that are almost on the fringes of sporting society, band together so we have a value proposition that brings wealth, so that when people retire, I think that's actually the crux of it. It's not while you in your career. When you retire, you've got a monthly subsistence allowance that allows you to continue without you feeling as though that the sport's ended, and as the sport ended, I also had nothing to show for it financially. So now I can't even put bread on the table. Now chat to a lot of the rugby players that I am closer to and footballers to be like, guys, what are we doing together? do you have a financial advisor? Do you have a wealth planner? Do you have an emergency fund? If you get injured tomorrow, who's paying your medical bills? And if you decide that this is not for me, what does that look like? Can you survive a year of no employment?
And if I was a sportsman and I knew you, I would definitely be ringing you every other day to find out what to do with my money. What are some of the key money lessons that you hold dear that you'd like to share with your kids someday?
I think I only really have one key money lesson, is that we live in a world where scarcity and fear mongering is what's sold. So really you need to be in a psychological space of abundance. But true abundance in the form of wealth is that I'm trying to create enough wealth for a future generation that I won't get to enjoy this pocket of wealth that I've created while I live in this lifetime. And if every generation does that, you can imagine the catapult and the domino effect that will happen, because you will live within your means today and allow for a better foundation for those who come after you, so that they also don't come into a world where it's hand to mouth. I don't know how to feed myself, but rather we're talking about, have we invested enough in our nature around us? Have we invested enough in schools? Have we invested enough in the spaces where if government is not doing it, we as a community can do it for ourselves?
I think I need you to repeat that again, because I think it's such a key lesson where the money you put away is not necessarily for your benefit. It could be for generations to come.
100%. And I think a different way of putting it is that if I plant a seed to grow a tree today, the shade of that tree is not something I might enjoy in my lifetime. And that's how we should be looking at wealth. We're planting a seed where that shade, after that seed has grown and we've all watered it across the generations, will be for somebody else to enjoy.
Looking back, you've done well with money, from what I've heard from this conversation. But what are some of the mistakes you think, oh man, I shouldn't have done that with that money? It didn't really work out.
I was a big spender, big baller. And I think one of the many mistakes I had is that in living in community, we often don't realize the influence that we have a bit of people pleasing. And I was then an athlete that represented the country, and that must come with a certain way you smell. It must come with a certain way you dress. The car you drive must reflect that you're a representative of this great nation, which we are so proud of. And I think I fell into that trap very early on. You know, I'm 21, I'm buying cars that I should never have just because it has a V8 and it purrs, which is nice for everyone around.
Sounds like a good reason.
A lot of my friends love that car. So when I sold it, I'm buying a motorbike just because of convenience. And who doesn't want to say that they're biking up to school? So I'm not saying I didn't make those mistakes.
Yeah.
I'm actually speaking from a place of, after you've made those mistakes, I'm telling you that gratification at the time is not worth it.
You also do work off the field and out of the office, where you try to help other young people with their own careers, but also others that have realized the same stigma that you had when you were a child. Just tell us some of the projects that you're involved in.
You know, I've been very blessed. It's like sometimes when you're open to receive in the world, you attract a very particular type of person. And I feel like I've attracted a lot of givers. And in doing so, partnered up with Jumping Kids, which is a nonprofit organization that looks at a very much a dual approach to life, which is kids that have had to have amputations will need access to assisted devices so that they can live their day to day. But those same kids, with what has happened to them in life, whether it's congenital or through an accident in whatever form, can use that experience to, and then, you know, tie in sport as an overlay to access primary education in spaces where they might not have been able to, because competition is a lot more and everyone is vying for the rugby or football scholarships, but not many people are vying for the para-athletic scholarship or the para-swimming scholarship. And they can then go into mainstream education. And then once you're there, the world is your oyster. So we have clinics around the country, around SADC, where we are really supporting kids that have these amputations get access to the devices. And after they have access to the devices, get access to mainstream education. And there's plenty of others. I'm involved in STEP Clubs for Care, also one of those deformities where if you have a club foot, and it's not like mine where it's amniotic band syndrome and it's deformed, club foot doesn't have to lead to a permanent disability, but then you must treat it very quickly, and you must treat it continuously. So we have clinics around the country, once again around Africa, with Karen, the CEO and founder, where they use the Ponseti method to get these braces, which are non-invasive corrective mechanisms that allow kids that have deformities not to have permanent disabilities, and they can go out and dream of being Olympians. They don't have to be a Paralympian. So there's a lot we do in the community, and it's not really because of me, but I think the narrative of what we've achieved in the sports field has allowed them to have access to funds and catalyze that narrative that together there's so much more. Come join the cause.
Can you tell us about those people that have held your hand along this beautiful journey that you've had? And what would you say to them today?
You know, I think for this one, I'd be very particular because we're speaking about finance, and I'll speak directly to my coach, Jason Sewenyana, because he caught me at a very early age, and he's been the greatest influence in terms of what we do with money, what we do with finance, what we do with wealth and accumulating it. And what I'd say to him is, firstly, thank you. You know, it takes a lot to give the invaluable resource of time to teach a stubborn, snot Zulu boy from KZN that a V8 that purrs might not be the best decision in life. And I think he was very patient. And in that patience, he said, I don't have the answers. And we're not here to get necessarily try find answers. We're here to get reasons. And when you have reasons, you think of that, you know, people talk about your why, people talk about your destiny, whatever it might be. But the reasons you wake up every day is the reasons why you will also accumulate wealth. And he was that formative mentor that says, find the reasons for the wealth. And once you find the reasons for the wealth, it's very easy to know that that investment is worth it for you, and you need to do more so you can invest more.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been very insightful, a very great conversation about your career and also how you treat your money. I think you're a bit stricter, probably stricter than me. But thank you so much for indulging us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's it from us here at Everything Counts Sports Edition. Remember to subscribe to Investec Focus Radio SA on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube for more episodes of Everything Counts.